There's a quiet tragedy unfolding in the kitchens of millions of older adults. They sip their steaming mugs of bone broth, believing it to be the elixir of vitality, a gentle, ancestral promise of strength and healing. Yet science now tells a different story. Bone broth, though warm and comforting, is little more than nostalgia in a cup. It soothes, yes, but it does not rebuild. It comforts the spirit, but it starves the muscle. And for seniors, that is the beginning of decline, because when muscle goes, life itself begins to shrink. Sarcopenia isn't merely about weak legs or frail arms. It's the body forgetting how to stay alive efficiently. Every contraction, every heartbeat, every breath depends on muscle tissue, the living machinery that defines vitality. When the body stops responding to protein the way it once did, when muscle fibers shrink and mitochondria slow their spark, aging accelerates. It's not time that breaks us. It's biochemical neglect. Here's the truth we now understand. Bone broth lacks what your muscles cry out for. Its protein profile is incomplete, rich in gelatin, but poor in leucine, the amino acid that flips the switch for muscle synthesis. Without leucine, the body cannot trigger the molecular signal that says, grow, repair, stay strong. So the elderly drink comfort but miss activation. It's like watering a plant without sunlight. The ritual is there, but the growth never comes. Now imagine instead a different ritual. A breakfast of eggs, Greek yogurt, or wild-caught salmon. Each bite rich in bioavailable protein, dense with leucine and omega-3s, speaking directly to the muscle cell's ancient intelligence. Within minutes, the body begins its quiet work, translating nutrition into resilience, energy, and structure. It's not a miracle. It's just biology finally being listened to. We often think of food as fuel, but for those who've crossed 60, it's more than that. It's information. Every molecule sends a message to your cells, either to build or to decay. The foods that fight sarcopenia are those that tell your body you are still capable. They awaken the mitochondria, stabilize blood sugar, balance hormones, and remind muscle tissue how to thrive. Aging gracefully, then, is not about surrendering to time. It's about aligning with the body's forgotten genius. True strength doesn't come from sipping broth and hoping for warmth. It comes from feeding the biology that builds us from within. And when seniors choose foods that speak this language, complete proteins, rich in leucine and life, they do more than preserve muscle. They reclaim their place in the world as being still capable of growth, power, and purpose. This speech is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider or nutrition specialist before making changes to your diet, supplement routine, or exercise program, especially if you have existing health conditions or are taking medication. The concepts discussed reflect current scientific understanding and are meant to inspire informed, responsible choices for overall well-being. For generations, bone broth has been glorified as a kind of golden cure, a humble healing potion that promises strength, vitality, and comfort, especially for the aging body. It's often seen as a bridge between tradition and wellness, an ancestral recipe passed down through time, celebrated for its supposed power to restore joints, heal the gut, and protect the bones. But beneath this comforting mythology lies a fundamental misunderstanding of how the human body, especially the aging body, actually maintains and rebuilds muscle tissue. The truth is that bone broth's reputation has outgrown its biochemical reality. While it provides warmth and nostalgia, it lacks the essential nutrients needed to genuinely counter the loss of muscle that comes with aging. For seniors who are battling sarcopenia, the slow, invisible erosion of muscle mass, this misplaced faith in bone broth can be a costly illusion. Bone broth is made by simmering animal bones, connective tissue, and cartilage for long hours. What results is liquid rich in collagen-derived proteins such as glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. These amino acids do have certain benefits. They may support joint comfort, aiding collagen synthesis for the skin, and contribute to gut health. But they are not the building blocks of muscle. To rebuild or preserve muscle, the body requires a specific set of essential amino acids that stimulate muscle protein synthesis, particularly leucine, isoleucine, and valine, the branched-chain amino acids that directly communicate with muscle cells to grow and repair. Bone broth, though high in protein by volume, is critically deficient in these key amino acids. This means that the elderly person drinking it regularly may feel nourished, but is in fact failing to send the right biochemical signals to preserve muscle integrity. The illusion of strength that comes from consuming bone broth arises because it provides satiety and comfort without necessarily promoting an anabolic state. The warmth can improve mood, hydration, and digestion, and those temporary benefits can easily be mistaken for deeper healing. Yet, when we look closer at the molecular level, what we find is a mismatch between perception and physiology. The body's ability to build muscle depends on activating a pathway known as mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin, which functions like a switchboard that tells cells when to grow. To trigger this pathway effectively, the blood concentration of leucine must reach a certain threshold. Bone broth simply cannot achieve that. It's like having the right machinery but missing the power source to turn it on. In contrast, foods that are rich in complete proteins, such as eggs, fish, dairy, or lean meats, carry a balanced amino acid spectrum that engages this muscle-building process fully. When a senior consumes such foods, the leucine content directly stimulates the muscle's anabolic machinery, prompting repair and growth, even after minor exertion. This isn't about consuming more protein overall, but about consuming intelligent protein, the kind that speaks the language of muscle metabolism. Bone broth, for all its comfort, speaks an entirely different language, one that the muscle cells no longer understand or respond to. There's also a deeper biological issue at play. As we age, the body becomes less responsive to protein intake, a phenomenon known as anabolic resistance. Older adults need a higher concentration of essential amino acids to trigger the same muscle-building response that younger individuals achieve with less. This means that the nutritional gap left by relying on bone broth becomes even wider with age. The amino acid profile that might have been merely suboptimal in youth becomes nearly ineffective later in life. The body, in its wisdom, prioritizes survival over growth. When deprived of the right nutrients, it conserves energy rather than building new tissue. Over time, this leads to a downward spiral of muscle atrophy, weakness, and fragility. The very definition of sarcopenia. Another misconception about bone broth lies in its supposed ability to strengthen bones, which is often used as an argument for its inclusion in senior diets. But scientific analysis shows that the mineral content of bone broth, including calcium and phosphorus, is surprisingly low. The nutrients in bones are not easily extracted through slow boiling, meaning that the end product contains only trace amounts of the minerals it's believed to provide. For seniors, whose bone density and muscle mass are interdependent systems, this means that bone broth offers little structural support. Healthy bones and muscles require active mechanical and metabolic engagement, something achieved through resistance exercise, adequate vitamin D and proper protein signaling, not through sipping collagen-rich liquid. When viewed through the lens of metabolic science, the persistence of bone broth as a muscle food reveals how emotion and culture can overshadow evidence. We cling to it because it feels ancient, natural, and nurturing, and because the ritual of making it carries emotional value. But the body is not persuaded by sentiment, it responds to chemistry. The elderly body especially requires precision in nutrition, enough leucine to stimulate mTOR, enough complete protein to repair muscle fibers, and enough metabolic energy to sustain regeneration. Bone broth fulfills none of these criteria in any meaningful way. This misunderstanding persists partly because the wellness industry often confuses comfort with efficacy. Marketing tends to elevate simple, rustic traditions into universal health solutions. But the science of aging is not nostalgic, it's pragmatic. The human body at 70 does not respond the way it did at 30. Its protein metabolism slows, its digestive efficiency drops, and its anabolic threshold rises. What once worked as casual nourishment now needs to be deliberate intervention. Bone broth, though soothing, belongs more to the realm of comfort food than clinical nutrition. Its role, if any, should be secondary, a supportive supplement for hydration and digestive ease, not the central pillar of a muscle-preserving diet. For seniors seeking to fight sarcopenia, understanding this distinction is essential. Relying on bone broth for protein is like using candlelight in an age that demands electricity. The nourishment it offers is outdated, insufficient, and incompatible with the biological needs of the aging body. What the body requires instead are complete proteins that contain all 9 essential amino acids, particularly leucine in sufficient concentration to ignite the body's internal repair systems. True rejuvenation lies not in replicating ancestral rituals, but in harmonizing ancient biological wisdom with modern scientific understanding. Sarcopenia is often described as an inevitable part of aging, a slow fading of strength that arrives with the passing years. But this view is both incomplete and misleading. The loss of muscle that occurs with age is not a destiny written in our DNA. It is a biochemical breakdown of communication between nutrients, hormones, and cells, a failure of the body's internal signaling networks to maintain its machinery. Aging may be the stage on which this process plays out, but it is not the script itself. Sarcopenia is not time's doing, it is biology's silence. When the body stops hearing the messages that tell it to grow, repair, and stay resilient, decline begins not because years have passed, but because the molecular conversations that sustain life have grown faint. In the young body, every meal that contains protein sends a message through the bloodstream to the muscles, instructing them to build and recover. This signal depends on amino acids, particularly leucine, interacting with receptors in muscle tissue that trigger protein synthesis through the mTOR pathway. In older adults, this system weakens. The same meal that once generated robust growth now produces only a whisper of response. This is anabolic resistance, the phenomenon where muscle cells become deaf to the body's nutritional cues. The body still receives food, but it cannot translate that food into tissue renewal with the same efficiency. This muted response is the biological root of sarcopenia, a malfunction in nutrient signaling rather than a simple shortage of protein intake. As the signaling deteriorates, a cascade of other imbalances follows. The mitochondria, the energy producers of the cells, begin to slow down. With less efficient energy production, muscle fibers fatigue faster and recover more slowly. Hormones that once supported muscle maintenance, like testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1, decline or lose their sensitivity, reducing anabolic drive. Chronic low-grade inflammation, common in older adults, interferes with muscle cell regeneration by activating catabolic pathways that break down proteins faster than they can be rebuilt. All of this contributes to a vicious cycle where the body's internal environment becomes biased toward decay instead of renewal. At a structural level, sarcopenia can be seen in the shrinking of individual muscle fibers and the loss of motor neurons that control them. Fast twitch fibers, which provide power and stability, are particularly vulnerable. As they atrophy, the body's balance, coordination, and metabolic efficiency decline. But this physical deterioration is merely the visible symptom of a deeper metabolic disorder, one where the muscle, one of the body's most metabolically active tissues, loses its role as a key regulator of energy balance. Muscle tissue acts as a massive reservoir for glucose disposal and amino acid storage. When it diminishes, the risk of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and even cognitive decline increases. Thus, sarcopenia is not an isolated problem of mobility, it's a whole body metabolic failure. The tragedy is that this process unfolds slowly, often unnoticed, because it masquerades as normal aging. People assume that fatigue, loss of strength, and shrinking limbs is simply the price of time. But beneath those signs is a correctable dysfunction, a failure of the cells to respond properly to nutrition and mechanical stimulation. Modern science now understands that by restoring proper nutrient signaling, muscle regeneration can be reignited even in the 7th or 8th decade of life. The body is not too old to respond. It has simply lost the biochemical cues it needs to remember how. Restoring those cues begins with understanding what the body truly requires to reawaken its anabolic pathways. Adequate intake of complete proteins, especially those rich in leucine, provides the raw materials and the trigger for synthesis. Resistance training acts as a complementary signal, sensitizing the muscle cells to amino acids by activating the same mTOR pathway that food does. Together they form a dual code, one mechanical, one nutritional, that instructs the body to rebuild. Without both, the signal remains incomplete. This is why sedentary aging accelerates sarcopenia, even in people who eat well, and why physical activity without proper nutrition cannot fully prevent it. The two must converge to restore the biochemical dialogue between muscle and metabolism. Beyond nutrients and movement, there's also the issue of inflammation and oxidative stress. As the body ages, it accumulates molecular damage from years of exposure to reactive oxygen species. This damage disrupts the communication lines inside cells and between organs. The immune system, constantly engaged in repair, remains slightly overactive, releasing cytokines that interfere with muscle regeneration. This chronic inflammatory state, sometimes called inflammaging, is one of the silent drivers of muscle loss. It blurs the anabolic signals the body depends on, confusing growth with breakdown. Anti-inflammatory nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, polyphenols, and antioxidants can help recalibrate this imbalance. But again, they work only when the foundation of amino acid signaling is strong. Hormonal decline adds another layer of complexity. The body's anabolic hormones, testosterone, estrogen, growth hormone, and DHEA, not only build tissue but also amplify the sensitivity of cells to nutrients. When these hormones diminish, nutrient signals become harder to interpret. The solution is not necessarily hormone replacement, which carries risks, but rather supporting the body's natural hormonal rhythm through exercise, sleep, and nutrition that optimize insulin and cortisol balance. By doing so, the body restores some of its lost communication ability, allowing even modest protein intake to have a stronger impact on muscle synthesis. Seen from this lens, sarcopenia becomes less a mystery of aging and more a systems failure, a breakdown of information flow in the body's intricate network of growth, repair, and adaptation. Every component that supports muscle, protein intake, mechanical stress, mitochondrial energy, hormonal balance, inflammation control depends on proper signaling. When one part falters, the rest follow. Reversing sarcopenia, therefore, isn't about adding isolated nutrients or supplements, but about re-establishing coherence in the system. It's about restoring the conversation that aging silences. There is something profoundly hopeful in this understanding. It means that the decline associated with aging is not written in stone, but can be reprogrammed at the cellular level. Muscles, even in advanced age, retain their capacity for growth. They only require the correct stimuli. What we call aging in many cases is simply the accumulation of uncorrected inefficiencies. When we give the body what it needs, nutrient signals it recognizes, physical challenges it adapts to, and recovery periods that allow rebuilding, it responds with remarkable precision. Sarcopenia, then, is not proof that life must fade, but a reminder that vitality depends on maintaining the biochemical language of growth. Leucine-rich foods such as eggs, fish, and fermented dairy hold a unique power within the human diet, a power that goes far beyond calories or protein content. They serve as direct biochemical communicators to the body's aging muscles, activating deep molecular pathways that determine whether muscle tissue is preserved or lost. In the context of aging, when the body's responsiveness to nutrition begins to fade, these foods become more than sustenance, they become medicine. The modern understanding of sarcopenia, the gradual wasting of muscle tissue that accompanies aging, has revealed that it is not a lack of food, but a lack of signal that drives the condition. The body receives protein, yet fails to interpret it as a command to rebuild. Leucine acts as that missing signal, a molecular key that unlocks the machinery of muscle protein synthesis. Among the essential amino acids, leucine stands apart for its ability to activate the mTORC1 pathway, the central regulator of cell growth and repair. This pathway operates like a master switch that determines whether the body is in the state of anabolism, building, or catabolism, breaking down. For young individuals, the threshold for activating this switch is easily met. Their muscles are sensitive, responsive, and metabolically efficient. But in older adults, this sensitivity diminishes, a phenomenon known as anabolic resistance. To overcome it, higher concentrations of leucine are required to elicit the same growth response. This is why the quality of protein becomes so critical with age. Not all proteins carry enough leucine to push the switch. Bone broth and gelatin, for instance, contain barely 1/10 of the leucine concentration found in eggs or fish, making them ineffective for muscle preservation. Eggs are among the most efficient sources of leucine, providing not only the amino acid in abundance, but also essential cofactors like choline, vitamin D, and omega-3 fats that enhance metabolic communication. The biological value of egg protein is nearly perfect because it mirrors the amino acid composition the human body needs for repair. When consumed, eggs deliver leucine directly into the bloodstream, raising its plasma concentration high enough to overcome anabolic resistance. For older individuals, this rise is the spark that reignites muscle synthesis. Each serving is not merely food. It's a coded message to muscle cells, a message that says, build again. Fish, particularly fatty varieties such as salmon, sardines, and mackerel, adds another layer of benefit. Beyond their high-quality protein and leucine content, these fish are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which have been shown to enhance muscle protein synthesis by improving cell membrane fluidity and reducing inflammation. In aging muscle, where chronic inflammation blunts anabolic signaling, omega-3s act like lubricants in a rusted machine, restoring sensitivity to the leucine signal. They help the mTOR pathway function more efficiently, meaning that each gram of leucine does more work at the cellular level. The anti-inflammatory effect of fish-derived omega-3s also protects mitochondria, the energy factories of the muscle, from oxidative stress, ensuring that energy supply remains stable for repair and regeneration. Fermented dairy foods such as Greek yogurt, kefir, and aged cheese bring yet another dimension. They not only provide leucine-rich casein and whey proteins, but also deliver probiotics that improve gut health and nutrient absorption. This connection between the gut and muscle, sometimes called the gut-muscle axis, becomes increasingly important with age. Poor digestion and microbiome imbalance can reduce amino acid absorption, meaning even the best diet may fail to deliver its benefits. Fermented dairy ensures that leucine and other amino acids are absorbed efficiently, and that inflammatory molecules from the gut are minimized. Whey protein in particular has one of the highest leucine concentrations of any natural food source, approximately 10 to 12% by weight, making it an exceptionally powerful tool for seniors combating muscle decline. The importance of these leucine-rich foods lies not just in their chemical makeup, but in their ability to restore communication between nutrition and physiology. As the body ages, the intricate signaling web that once allowed food to dictate repair processes becomes less coordinated. By reintroducing foods that deliver potent molecular messages, we remind the body of its original rhythm. Leucine tells muscle cells to synthesize new fibers. Omega-3s and probiotics reduce the interference that dulls the signal. Complete proteins ensure the presence of all amino acids needed to assemble new tissue. The combination forms a kind of biological symphony that reactivates the body's capacity for growth. There's also an evolutionary logic behind this. In early human life, survival depended on the ability to adapt to periods of scarcity and stress. Muscle tissue functioned as both an energy reserve and a signaling organ, modulating metabolism according to nutrient availability. Leucine played a central role in this system, serving as a nutrient sensor that told the body when conditions were favorable for growth. With modern diets often dominated by processed carbohydrates and incomplete proteins, this ancient signaling mechanism is rarely triggered effectively, especially in the elderly. The reintroduction of leucine-rich whole foods reconnects us with that primal intelligence, the body's built-in mechanism for maintaining strength and vitality. It's worth noting that not all sources of protein are equal in this respect. Plant-based proteins, while beneficial for other aspects of health, often fall short in leucine density and bioavailability. For seniors who rely heavily on plant proteins, the anabolic response tends to be weaker, requiring either large quantities of food or supplementation to match the effects of animal-derived sources. The goal is not exclusion but optimization, ensuring that every meal carries enough leucine to cross the activation threshold for muscle synthesis. Roughly 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per meal is needed to fully stimulate the mTOR pathway in older adults, an amount achievable through about 3 eggs, a serving of fish, or a cup of high-protein yogurt. Beyond the molecular science, there is a deeper human dimension to this nutritional insight. Eating leucine-rich foods represents an act of participation in one's own renewal. It challenges the narrative that aging must equal weakness, and that the body inevitably succumbs to decay. Each bite of nutrient-dense, protein-rich food is a conversation with one's own biology, an assertion that the systems of repair and vitality can still function if given the right instructions. The elderly body does not lose the ability to rebuild. It only loses clarity of signal. Foods like eggs, fish, and fermented dairy restore that clarity, translating nourishment into strength with remarkable precision. Leucine, then, is not just an amino acid, it is a messenger of resilience. It bridges the gap between eating and thriving, between aging and vitality. Through its presence in the right foods, it allows the aging body to remember its design, to respond to nutrition not with resignation, but with regeneration. The process of reversing muscle decline is far more intricate than simply increasing protein intake or exercising more often. It involves reawakening the body's dormant systems of growth, repair, and cellular energy production that have been muted by age. Within this web of physiological interactions, 3 elements play central roles: mitochondria, hormones, and the structural integrity of muscle fibers. When these systems are nourished and synchronized through complete amino acid nutrition, the body can regain much of its lost strength and metabolic vigor, even in advanced years. The decline we call aging is, in large part, a story of communication breakdown, the body's cells forgetting how to respond to the nutrients that once sustained their vitality. Reversing that decline begins with reminding them how to listen again. At the heart of muscle tissue lies a network of mitochondria, microscopic power plants responsible for converting nutrients into usable energy. Every contraction of a muscle fiber depends on their efficiency. In youth, mitochondria are abundant and robust, producing energy with minimal waste. But with age, oxidative stress, inactivity, and poor nutrition damage their structure and reduce their number. When mitochondrial activity slows, the muscle loses endurance and becomes more susceptible to fatigue and breakdown. This decline is not irreversible, but it requires precise biochemical stimulation to reverse. Complete amino acid nutrition provides the raw materials to rebuild mitochondrial proteins and enzymes, while specific amino acids such as leucine and lysine activate pathways that promote mitochondrial biogenesis. When paired with physical movement, particularly resistance and aerobic exercise, the combination signals the body to generate new mitochondria, restoring the energy dynamics that once powered strength and vitality. Hormones represent the second major pillar of muscle preservation and recovery. In youth, hormones like testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, operate in harmony to sustain muscle protein synthesis and repair. With age, these levels decline or become less effective, creating a hormonal environment that favors breakdown over building. The result is a metabolic shift toward catabolism, a slow erosion of tissue that outpaces regeneration. Nutrition, however, can influence hormonal signaling profoundly. When the body receives a balanced supply of amino acids, particularly those derived from high-quality protein sources. It experiences a controlled rise in insulin and IGF-1 that directly stimulates muscle protein synthesis. This does not mean spiking blood sugar or relying on carbohydrate-heavy diets, but rather using protein strategically to elicit small, steady hormonal responses that encourage repair. In this way, food functions as an endocrine modulator, restoring the natural rhythms of growth without external hormones. The connection between nutrition and hormones goes deeper still. Adequate protein intake supports the synthesis of peptide hormones that regulate metabolism, immune function, and recovery. For instance, amino acids like arginine contribute to the release of growth hormone, while tryptophan supports serotonin production, influencing sleep and stress response, both of which are essential for muscle regeneration. Cortisol, the stress hormone, becomes particularly problematic in older adults when chronically elevated, as it accelerates muscle degradation. A diet rich in complete proteins helps stabilize blood sugar and reduce cortisol spikes, maintaining a hormonal balance that protects muscle tissue rather than eroding it. The interplay between nutrition and endocrine health forms a feedback loop. When amino acid intake is optimized, hormonal balance improves, which in turn enhances the body's ability to utilize those same amino acids for structural repair. Muscle fiber integrity is the third element in this triad. Each muscle fiber is composed of intricate protein filaments, actin and myosin, that slide past one another to create movement. These filaments must be continuously repaired and replaced to maintain strength and flexibility. Aging disrupts this process in two main ways: through inadequate amino acid availability and chronic low-grade inflammation. When the body lacks sufficient essential amino acids, the replacement of damaged proteins slows, leaving fibers weak and fragmented. At the same time, inflammation driven by oxidative stress or poor metabolic control interferes with protein synthesis and collagen repair in the surrounding connective tissue. This combination leads to stiff, fragile muscles that tear easily and heal poorly. By supplying all 9 essential amino acids in the right proportions, the body can repair these fibers efficiently, restoring the structural integrity that defines functional strength. The quality of protein intake determines whether this rebuilding process succeeds or fails. Proteins from eggs, fish, and dairy contain a complete amino acid profile that mirrors the human body's needs. Plant proteins, while valuable for overall health, often lack one or more essential amino acids and may require careful combination to achieve completeness. Incomplete proteins cannot fully support the rebuilding of mitochondrial enzymes or muscle fibers. For this reason, older adults benefit from incorporating high-quality animal or supplemented plant proteins in each meal, ensuring that the muscle receives the full blueprint for reconstruction. Every amino acid plays a role. Leucine triggers synthesis. Lysine aids in collagen formation. Methionine supports methylation and detoxification. And tryptophan regulates mood and sleep, which indirectly affect recovery. Nutrition in this sense is not just fuel, but an architectural language that instructs cells how to rebuild. Beyond amino acids and hormones, energy metabolism must also be considered. When mitochondrial activity is restored through both exercise and nutrition, the body's energy efficiency improves dramatically. Muscles begin to oxidize fat more effectively, glucose utilization stabilizes, and the entire metabolic system becomes more responsive. This has a ripple effect. Better energy metabolism reduces systemic inflammation, which further enhances muscle protein synthesis. It creates a positive feedback loop where strength leads to more energy and more energy supports continued strength. Mitochondria, hormones, and muscle fibers operate not as separate systems but as components of one unified metabolic network, each influencing the other through the language of nutrients. Resistance training amplifies this communication, acting as the physical counterpart to amino acid signaling. When muscles contract under load, they generate mechanical tension that activates cellular pathways overlapping with those stimulated by leucine and other amino acids. This dual activation produces a synergistic effect, greatly enhancing the rate of muscle repair and mitochondrial regeneration. Exercise, in essence, translates the biochemical messages of nutrition into physical adaptation. Without the proper nutrients, however, these signals remain incomplete. This is why muscle recovery in older adults depends not merely on activity but on the precise nutritional environment that supports it. There is a poetic symmetry in how these processes work together. The mitochondria provide the energy for muscle contraction, hormones deliver the signals to repair and grow, and amino acids provide the raw material to build the fibers themselves. When any one of these components falters, the others decline in response, and the body gradually loses its capacity for renewal. But when complete amino acid nutrition restores balance to this triad, the effects are profound. The muscles regain tone and endurance. Metabolism stabilizes and vitality returns not as a fleeting sensation, but as a sustained biological state. Aging in this light becomes less a process of loss and more a shift in communication, a conversation between food, cells, and energy that can be reignited at any age through nourishment that aligns with the body's deepest design. Strength in later life is not a matter of consuming more food, but of choosing food that speaks intelligently to the body's cellular language. The aging body does not simply need calories, it needs precision. Each meal becomes a signal, a code that tells the body whether to build or decay, to store or to renew. Eat it intelligently means aligning nutrition with the body's shifting metabolic priorities, feeding not just the appetite but the underlying biological systems that sustain strength, energy, and purpose. With age, these systems grow more selective. The muscles, hormones, and mitochondria that once thrived on abundance now demand clarity and quality. A senior body no longer responds to general nourishment. It requires targeted communications through nutrient-dense, bioactive foods that awaken its latent capacity for repair. The mistake most people make as they age is to treat eating as a matter of volume. They add more protein, more supplements, or more calories, believing that quantity alone can compensate for decline. But biology is more sophisticated than that. The elderly body faces a phenomenon known as anabolic resistance, a reduced sensitivity to the anabolic signals from protein. What once took 10 grams of amino acids to stimulate muscle synthesis may now require 30, yet even that number is meaningless if the protein lacks the right amino acid composition. Eat it intelligently means understanding that muscle growth and maintenance depend not just on the presence of protein, but on its quality, particularly its leucine content and digestibility. A meal of refined carbohydrates and incomplete protein will not send the same message to the body as one rich in eggs, fish, or fermented dairy. The former fills, the latter rebuilds. To eat intelligently is to choose foods that align with the rhythm of the body's repair cycles. Morning protein, for instance, is critical because it coincides with peak cortisol levels. Consuming leucine-rich foods during this time helps convert that hormonal signal, which otherwise breaks down tissue, into one that supports energy and rebuilding. Evening meals benefit from slower digesting proteins, such as casein found in yogurt or cottage cheese, which sustain amino acid release through the night when the body performs most of its restorative work. This timing is part of metabolic intelligence, understanding not just what to eat, but when to eat it, so that nutrients interact harmoniously with the body's internal clocks. Beyond timing, intelligent eating for seniors also involves texture and digestibility. Aging often impairs digestion and absorption. Stomach acid decreases, enzyme production slows, and the microbiome becomes less diverse. Simply eating nutrient-dense food is not enough if the body cannot extract what it needs from it. This is where fermented foods and easily digestible proteins become invaluable. Fermented dairy, for example, pre-digests lactose and protein, reducing digestive strain while increasing bioavailability. Similarly, cooking methods that preserve amino acids and prevent oxidative damage, such as steaming or gentle poaching, can make the difference between nourishment that heals and food that exhausts. The goal is efficiency, delivering maximum nutrition with minimum metabolic stress. Eating intelligently also means avoiding the foods that interfere with the body's anabolic processes. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and blood sugar instability all work against muscle preservation, Highly processed foods rich in refined oils, sugars, and artificial additives generate inflammatory molecules that disrupt insulin sensitivity and weaken nutrient signaling. The senior body, already battling hormonal shifts and reduced mitochondrial output, cannot afford these interferences. Whole, unprocessed foods, especially those high in antioxidants and omega-3 fatty acids, restore balance by quieting inflammation and improving the efficiency of protein metabolism. A diet rich in leafy greens, berries, fatty fish, olive oil and nuts creates the biochemical environment necessary for muscles to respond optimally to protein. At a philosophical level, eating intelligently is an act of listening, of recognizing that the body is not a machine to be filled, but an ecosystem to be tuned. Each meal becomes a dialogue between the conscious mind and the biological intelligence that has evolved over millennia. When one eats with awareness, choosing foods that the body recognizes, digests, and utilizes efficiently, the act of eating becomes restorative. It is not about restriction or indulgence, but about respect for the body's needs in its current phase of life. This understanding reframes aging not as decline, but as refinement. At a time when the body demands more thoughtful fuel because it has learned through experience to value precision over abundance. The hormonal and metabolic systems of older adults respond differently than those of younger people, but they remain adaptable. The body can regain anabolic sensitivity through repeated exposure to high-quality protein paired with movement. Each intelligently composed meal reinforces this adaptation. Over time, the body begins to respond more efficiently again. Muscle synthesis becomes easier, energy returns, and strength improves. This is not the result of a miracle supplemental diet trend, but of consistency, of eating foods that align with human biology's natural design. The repetition of small, smart choices rewires the body's metabolic expectations. It learns that food is no longer an overload of conflicting signals, but a clear instruction to maintain and thrive. The social and emotional dimensions of intelligent eating are just as crucial. Many seniors eat alone, quickly or out of habit, disconnected from the sensory and psychological aspects of nourishment. Yet the nervous system, digestion, and metabolism are deeply intertwined with emotion and awareness. When one eats mindfully, engaging smell, taste, and gratitude, the parasympathetic nervous system activates, enhancing digestion and nutrient assimilation. Intelligent eating is therefore not only about what enters the mouth, but also about the state of the mind while consuming it. Stress, guilt and distraction weaken absorption and blunt hormonal signaling. Calm, presence, and appreciation amplify the body's receptivity to nourishment. The concept of eating intelligently ultimately converges on a simple truth. Longevity is not built on excess, but on efficiency. The elderly body can thrive with less food if that food is molecularly complete, energetically clean, and metabolically coherent. Instead of chasing variety for its own sake, one focuses on function, on foods that repair mitochondria, restore hormones, and rebuild fibers. It's not about deprivation, it's about alignment. The power lies in knowing that every forkful carries a message. The choice between a refined meal and a biologically rich one is the choice between accelerating decline or supporting renewal. When food is treated not as comfort or tradition, but as communication, the act of eating regains its ancient purpose, to sustain life at the deepest level. Eat it, that oath, matching what we consume to who we have become. It is the bridge between knowledge and vitality, between aging as surrender and aging as evolution. The senior who learns to eat in harmony with the body's biochemical truth does not merely extend life, but expands it, turning each meal into an affirmation of strength, resilience, and awareness. If this message inspired you to rethink how food shapes strength and longevity, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more science-based insights on aging well and living stronger. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. What foods have made the biggest difference in your energy and vitality? Your story might inspire someone else's transformation.